The evening rush at Bellissimo restaurant was in full swing. The clinking of silverware against fine china mixed with the steady hum of conversation as guests in designer clothes sipped expensive wine. Among them moved Lena, her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun, eyes alert despite the tiredness that pulled at her shoulders. Lena had been on her feet for 6 hours already. The soles of her black work shoes were worn thin, and her back ached from carrying heavy trays, but her movements remained graceful. At 26, she wasn't like the other servers, mostly college kids working for extra cash. For her, this job meant survival, the difference between pursuing her dream and letting it slip away. "Table 12 needs more wine," called out Roberto, the floor manager, as he passed her with a stack of menus. "And watch yourself tonight. The guy at table 7 owns half the tech companies in the country. Big tipper if you impress him, but he's got a reputation." Lena nodded, her eyes drifting to table 7, where 5 men in tailored suits sat around a man with salt and pepper hair cut close to his head. He wore no tie with his expensive suit, and his laugh carried across the room, confident and loud. This was Victor Reed, tech billionaire, whose face Lena had seen splashed across business magazines displayed at the corner store she passed on her way to music school. "Great," Lena whispered to herself. "Just what I need tonight." She'd been up since 5 that morning, practicing at the piano in the basement of her music school before her classes. Her fingers still felt stiff from the complicated Rachmaninoff piece her professor insisted she master before the end of the semester. 6 years at the conservatory instead of the usual 4, because she'd had to take time off when Grandma Rosa got sick. Now, at an age when many of her former classmates had established careers, she was still waiting tables and chasing a dream that felt further away each day. Lena tucked a stray hair behind her ear and straightened her black waistcoat. She grabbed the bottle of wine for table 12 and moved smoothly between the tables, her tired mind already calculating how tonight's tips might help with next month's rent. As she poured wine for an older couple celebrating their anniversary, she couldn't help overhearing Victor Reed's booming voice. "The problem with most people," he was saying, stabbing a fork toward one of his dining companions, "is they don't understand value. They think small. That's why they stay small." The men around him nodded, their eyes never leaving his face. One of them, younger than the rest with anxious eyes, laughed too loudly at everything Victor said. Lena finished with table 12 and checked her section. Victor's table had been assigned to her. With a deep breath, she approached, notepad ready. "Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Lena, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. Can I start you off with some drinks?" 5 pairs of eyes turned to her briefly, then back to Victor, waiting for him to lead. The billionaire didn't look up from his phone, his fingers tapping rapidly at the screen. "Whiskey. The Macallan 25. Neat," he said without acknowledging her presence. One by one, the others ordered, each trying to match Victor's confidence but fumbling slightly under the pressure. Lena wrote down their orders with practiced efficiency, asking appropriate questions about preferences. Only when she turned to leave did Victor finally look up. "Wait," he called, his eyes settling on her for the first time. "Aren't you going to tell us about the specials? Or is that too much to expect these days?" Heat crept up Lena's neck. Of course there were specials. She'd been so focused on not disturbing their conversation that she'd forgotten the basics. "I'm very sorry, sir. Tonight we have a pan-seared halibut with a lemon caper sauce, served with roasted fingerling potatoes and seasonal vegetables. We also have a dry-aged ribeye with a red wine reduction and truffle mashed potatoes." Victor stared at her, one eyebrow slightly raised. "And the pricing?" "The halibut is $42 and the ribeye is $65, Lena replied, maintaining her composure. "Fine. I'll have the ribeye, rare." He looked back at his phone, dismissing her. Lena retreated to place their drink orders, her cheeks still warm with embarrassment. Roberto caught her eye from across the room and gave her a questioning look. She shook her head slightly to indicate everything was fine. The night continued at its relentless pace. Lena moved between her tables, refilling water glasses, delivering appetizers, clearing plates. Each time she approached Victor's table, the conversation would dim slightly, then resume as she walked away. They were discussing some new technology acquisition, numbers in the millions tossed around like loose change. When it came time to serve their main courses, Lena balanced the heavy tray on her shoulder and arm with practiced skill. The kitchen had been backed up and she could feel the impatience radiating from Victor's table. She approached carefully, setting the first plate down before Victor. "The ribeye, rare," she said, placing it precisely before him. Victor glanced at the steak and frowned. "This doesn't look rare to me." Lena peered at the steak. The center was deep red, exactly as a rare steak should be. "I believe it is cooked to rare specifications, sir, but I'd be happy to. I've eaten at restaurants across the world." Victor cut her off. "I know what rare looks like. This is medium rare at best." The other men at the table shifted uncomfortably. The youngest one peered at Victor's plate. "It looks pretty rare to me, Victor," he ventured, then immediately regretted speaking when Victor turned cold eyes on him. "Did I ask for your culinary opinion, Parker?" Parker shrank back, and Lena felt a twinge of sympathy for him. "I'll have the kitchen prepare another one right away," she offered, reaching for the plate. "Don't bother." Victor sighed dramatically. "I don't have time to wait another 30 minutes. I'll eat this one, but I expect it to be reflected in the bill." Lena nodded and continued serving the other guests. As she reached across to place the final dish, her elbow bumped a water glass. She caught it before it could spill completely, but a few drops landed on the white tablecloth near Victor's sleeve. The table fell silent. Victor looked at the small water droplets, then up at Lena, his eyes narrowing. "Well," he said, his voice carrying across the now quieting restaurant, "I suppose attention to detail isn't a job requirement here." Lena froze, the nearly empty tray still balanced on her shoulder. Other diners glanced over, curious about the disruption. "I'm very sorry." "Sir?" she said quietly, reaching for her serving cloth to dab at the tiny wet spots. "Careful," Victor said with exaggerated concern. "We wouldn't want you to cause a flood, though perhaps you should consider a career that requires less coordination. Playing in traffic, maybe?" One of the men gave a nervous chuckle. The others stared at their plates. A few diners at nearby tables exchanged uncomfortable glances. Lena's hand trembled slightly as she finished drying the cloth. 6 years of classical piano training had given her fingers strength and precision that most people couldn't imagine. Hours upon hours of scales and arpeggios, of holding her hands just so, of learning to make her fingers dance across 88 keys to create magic. And this man thought she lacked coordination. "Will there be anything else, sir?" she asked, her voice steady despite the anger and humiliation burning in her chest. Victor waved her away. "Just try not to trip on your way back to the kitchen." Lena walked away, her back straight, her steps measured. In the kitchen, she placed the tray down carefully before allowing her hands to curl into fists. One of the line cooks, Jin, glanced over at her. "Rich jerk giving you trouble?" he asked, flipping a piece of fish with practiced ease. "Nothing I can't handle," Lena replied, uncurling her fingers and flexing them. Tonight she would go home and play until her fingers ached, pouring all of this into the music. Chopin's revolutionary etude seemed appropriate. All that contained fury translated into something beautiful. For now, though, she had other tables to serve. Other guests who weren't trying to make themselves feel important by belittling someone they saw as beneath them. Lena splashed cold water on her wrists, an old trick her piano teacher had taught her to center herself before performances, and picked up a fresh pot of coffee. As she emerged from the kitchen, she heard Victor's laugh, again louder than before. He was telling some story that had his companions in stitches, his earlier rudeness apparently forgotten. Lena moved to her other tables, smiling, taking orders, clearing plates. No one at those tables knew she was anything other than a waitress. They didn't know about the calluses on her fingertips from hours of practice, or the scholarship she'd won, or how close she was to finally finishing her degree. That was the thing about people like Victor. They looked at someone like her and saw only what they expected to see. They never imagined there might be more to the story, that the person refilling their water might have depths they couldn't fathom. Little did Victor know that in just a few hours, everything would change. The woman he had dismissed as clumsy and unimportant would show him exactly what she was capable of, in a way he would never forget. The night dragged on at Bellissimo. Lena moved between tables with practiced efficiency, her embarrassment from Victor's table fading as she focused on her other guests. A family celebrating a graduation, an older gentleman dining alone who spoke kindly and left a generous tip, a couple on what was clearly a first date, both nervous and trying not to show it. This was the part of her job Lena actually enjoyed, these small glimpses into other people's lives, the brief connections. It reminded her of why she loved music in the first place, the way it built bridges between strangers, created moments of shared feeling. From the corner of her eye, she watched Victor's table. They were on dessert now, the men leaning in as Victor spoke, his hands moving dramatically to emphasize whatever point he was making. Every now and then, one of them would glance nervously at his nearly empty glass, but none dared interrupt him to ask for a refill. Lena approached carefully, keeping her distance as she topped up their water glasses. Exactly what I told the board, Victor was saying. Either innovate or get left behind. That's why we acquired that little startup last month. Brilliant. Engineering team. Terrible business sense. Got them for a fraction of their value. The men nodded appreciatively, as though Victor had shared profound wisdom rather than a common business strategy. Only Parker, the youngest one who'd spoken up earlier, seemed less enthusiastic. His eyes followed Lena as she refilled his water, and he mouthed a silent thank you when Victor wasn't looking. As Lena stepped away, she felt a hand on her arm. It was Roberto, the floor manager, his usual calm demeanor replaced with barely concealed panic. "We have a problem," he whispered, steering her toward a quiet corner. "Chen just called. His car broke down on the highway. He's not going to make it." Lena's brow furrowed. "Chen? The pianist?" Roberto nodded grimly. "Tonight of all nights, Mr. Leone is hosting that big party in the private room, and he specifically requested live piano music for after dinner." Mr. Leone was the restaurant's owner, a man who rarely made appearances but whose standards were legendary. His private parties at Bellissimo were exclusive affairs, often attended by the city's elite. "Can't you call someone else?" Lena asked. "On a Friday night with an hour's notice?" Roberto ran a hand through his thinning hair. "I've tried 3 people already. Everyone's booked. Mr. Leone is going to kill me." Lena bit her lip, considering. She could play better than Chen, if she was being honest, but she was on shift, and after the incident with Victor Reed, the last thing she needed was to draw more attention to herself. "What about recordings?" she suggested. "Some nice jazz, maybe?" Roberto shook his head. Mr. Leone was clear. Live music. He's entertaining potential investors. His eyes suddenly widened, focusing on something behind Lena. "Mr. Leone, good evening." Lena turned to see a distinguished man in his 60s approaching them. Anthony Leone had the kind of presence that commanded attention without effort. Tall, impeccably dressed, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Roberto," he nodded, "is everything prepared for my guests? They'll be moving to the Tuscany room after their main course." "Almost everything, sir," Roberto replied, his voice slightly higher than normal. "But I'm afraid Chen, our pianist, has had car trouble. He won't be able to make it tonight." Mr. Leone's expression didn't change, but the temperature around them seemed to drop several degrees. "I specifically mentioned the importance of music tonight. These investors appreciate the finer things. We're trying to find a replacement, sir." "My guests will be finishing dinner in 20 minutes, Mr. Leone interrupted. "I expect a solution by then." As he walked away, Roberto turned to Lena with desperate eyes. "I'm finished. 6 years working. My way up, and this is how it ends." Lena watched Mr. Leone rejoin a table in the corner, where several well-dressed guests sat. With a sinking feeling, she realized Victor Reed's table was right next to them. Mr. Leone leaned down to speak with Victor, who laughed and clapped the older man on the shoulder like an old friend. Of course they knew each other. Men like that always did. "Roberto, she said slowly. I can play. The manager looked at her blankly. You what? I can play piano. I'm at the conservatory. Classical performance. Hope dawned on Roberto's face, quickly replaced by doubt. You're serious? Wait, why didn't you ever mention this before? Lena shrugged. Never came up. Look, I'm not saying I'm perfect, but I know enough pieces to get through a couple of hours. Roberto studied her face, weighing his limited options. Mr. Leone doesn't like surprises. And he doesn't like disappointments either. Lena pointed. What's worse, an unexpected server at the piano or no pianist at all? After a moment's hesitation, Roberto nodded. All right, but you'll need to change. We can't have you in a server's uniform at the piano. I don't exactly carry concert attire in my locker, Lena said. Talk to Diane at the coat check. She's about your size and always has a spare dress for emergencies. 10 minutes later, Lena stood in the employee restroom, staring at her reflection. Diane's black dress was simpler than what Lena would normally wear for a performance, but it was elegant. Enough. Her hair, freed from its tight bun, fell in waves past her shoulders. She looked like herself again, not just a server, but Lena Reyes, pianist. A knock at the door startled her. 2 minutes, called Roberto. They're moving to the Tuscany room, now. Lena's stomach tightened with familiar pre-performance nerves. This wasn't a school recital. These were wealthy, powerful people who expected professional entertainment, and Victor Reed would be there watching her. Part of her, a small petty part that she wasn't particularly proud of, relished the idea of his face when he recognized her. But a larger part was simply terrified. She splashed cold water on her wrists again and took a deep breath. Just play the music, she whispered to herself. The rest doesn't matter. The Tuscany room was Bellissimo's crown jewel, a warm, intimate space with rich wooden panels, subtle lighting, and acoustics that made even whispered conversations carry clearly. In the corner stood a gleaming black grand piano that Lena had admired from afar but never touched. As she entered through a side door, the room was filling with guests, including Mr. Leone's party, and, to her dismay, Victor Reed's group. Victor himself was deep in conversation with Mr. Leone, gesturing animatedly. Neither noticed her as she slipped toward the piano. Lena sat down, adjusting the bench height with practiced movements. Her fingers brushed across the keys, testing the action. The piano was magnificent, responsive in a way the tired upright she practiced on at home could never be. For a moment she forgot her nerves, lost in appreciation of the instrument. Then she looked up and caught Victor staring at her, his brow furrowed in confusion. Recognition dawned in his eyes, followed by disbelief. He leaned over to one of his companions, whispering something that made the other man turn to look at her too. Lena's cheeks burned. She could walk away now, tell Roberto she couldn't do it, after all. But then her fingers found their position on the keys, muscle memory taking over. She began to play. The opening notes of Debussy's Clair de Lune floated into the room, gentle and clear. Lena closed her eyes, letting the familiar piece wash over her. This was her territory now. Here, she knew exactly what to do. Conversations gradually quieted as people noticed the music. Lena kept her focus on the keyboard, her body swaying slightly as the piece built. When she reached the flowing middle section, she chanced to glance up. The room had fallen silent. All eyes were on her, including Victor's. His expression was unreadable, his whiskey glass frozen halfway to his lips. Lena finished the Debussy with a delicate final chord that lingered in the air. Before anyone could react, she transitioned smoothly into a Chopin nocturne, filling the silence. From the corner of her eye, she saw Mr. Leone watching her, his head tilted slightly in appreciation. His guests were leaning back in their chairs, drinks forgotten as they listened. Even Roberto, standing by the door, seemed transfixed. But it was Victor's face that Lena found herself returning to. The arrogance had vanished, replaced by something she couldn't quite identify. Confusion? Embarrassment? Perhaps a bit of both. As the nocturne reached its conclusion, A woman Lena hadn't noticed before approached the piano. She was elegant, with silver-streaked dark hair and an air of quiet authority. "Excuse me," she said softly as Lena finished the piece. "That was exquisite. Would you take a request?" "Of course," Lena replied, her performer's smile automatic. "Do you know any Ludovico? Einaudi? Nouveau Le Bianc, perhaps?" Lena nodded. It wasn't classical repertoire, but she'd played it often. The contemporary piece was popular with casual listeners and a good change of pace in a program. As she began the gentle, repeating pattern of notes, she saw the woman return to her seat, at Mr. Leone's table. She whispered something to him and he nodded, looking thoughtfully at Lena. The evening continued this way. Lena playing a mix of classical pieces and more accessible contemporary works. The room filled with appreciative silence broken occasionally by applause. Her initial nervousness faded, replaced by the familiar joy of performance. Even knowing Victor was watching couldn't diminish the pleasure of playing on such a beautiful instrument for an attentive audience. During a brief pause between pieces, Lena noticed Victor rise from his table and approach the piano. Her hands tensed on the keys. What could he possibly want? To embarrass her again? But as he drew near, she saw something unexpected in his expression. Uncertainty. Victor Reed, the man who had dismissed her so casually hours ago, now seemed unsure of himself. That was... He began, then stopped as if the words wouldn't come. "You're the server from earlier." It wasn't a question, but Lena answered anyway. "Yes." He opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. "I didn't realize that I had other skills," Lena supplied, her voice cool but not unkind. Victor had the grace to look uncomfortable. Something like that. They looked at each other for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, Victor Reed, billionaire, tech mogul, man accustomed to commanding rooms, gave a small, acknowledging nod. "Play something else?" he asked, almost like a request rather than an order. Lena turned back to the keys. "I think I will." After Victor walked back to his seat, Lena let her fingers hover over the keys for a moment. What should she play now? Something to match this strange, unexpected moment. This shift in the air between her and the man who had tried to humiliate her just hours ago. She chose Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, starting with the familiar, haunting first movement. As she played, she felt rather than saw the room settling into deeper attention. This wasn't background music anymore. The guests were listening, really listening. Through the corner of her eye, Lena caught Roberto signaling a waiter to dim the lights slightly. The Tuscany room took on a warmer, more intimate glow. Wine glasses clinked softly as conversations fell to whispers, then to silence. Lena's world narrowed to just her hands on the keys and the music flowing through her. When she began the third movement, fast, technical, and passionate, she heard someone gasp. The piece demanded everything from a pianist: speed, precision, emotional range. On the tired, upright piano in her apartment, Lena sometimes struggled with it. But here, on this magnificent grand piano, her fingers flew across the keys with newfound freedom. She forgot about Victor Reed, forgot about the wealthy audience, forgot about her aching feet from hours of carrying trays. For these minutes she was only a musician, speaking through the universal language that had called to her since childhood. As the final chords rang out, Lena opened eyes she hadn't realized she'd closed. The room erupted in applause. Not the polite kind that follows background music, but enthusiastic, genuine appreciation. Mr. Leone was on his feet, clapping with unexpected vigor. Several guests at his table had joined him, and there was Victor, still seated, his hands moving together slowly, his eyes never leaving her face. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something Lena couldn't quite name. The elegant woman who had made the earlier request approached the piano again. "That was remarkable," she said, her voice warm with admiration. "I'm Mei Lin. I work with Crescent Records." Lena's heart skipped a beat. Crescent Records was one of the most respected classical music labels in the country. Thank you, Lena replied, struggling to keep her voice steady. I'm Lena Reyes. Lena, May smiled. Tell me, why haven't I heard of you before? Where do you perform regularly? Heat crept up Lena's neck. I don't actually. I'm still at the conservatory. This is just my job to pay the bills. May's eyebrows rose. The conservatory? Which year? 6th, Lena admitted. I had to take some time off. Instead of the judgment, Lena expected, May nodded thoughtfully. Life happens. But talent like yours doesn't come along every day, no matter how long the journey takes. She pulled a business card from her clutch and placed it on the piano. Call me next week. I'd like to hear more of your playing in a proper setting. As May walked away, Lena stared at the small white card, hardly believing what had just happened. A talent scout from Crescent Records wanted to hear more. After years of struggle, of wondering if she'd made the right choice, of balancing work and school and practice and grief when Grandma Rosa passed, this moment felt unreal. She was so absorbed in her thoughts that she didn't notice Victor approaching again until he cleared his throat. Ms. Reyes, he said, and Lena looked up in surprise. He'd learned her name. I wonder if I might have a word. The room had returned to normal conversation levels, guests sipping their drinks as they chatted. No one was paying attention to them. Now. Lena nodded, still seated at the piano bench. Victor shifted his weight from one foot to the other. A surprisingly human gesture from someone who had seemed so untouchable earlier. I believe I owe you an apology, he said, his voice lower than before, meant only for her ears. My behavior at dinner was inexcusable. Lena studied his face, searching for insincerity, but found none. Thank you for saying that. I made assumptions, Victor continued. I saw the uniform, not the person. He gestured toward the piano. Clearly I was wrong. We all make assumptions, Lena said, running her fingers lightly over the keys without pressing them. We see what we expect to see. Victor nodded, seeming to consider her words. What else do you play? Besides piano? Nothing, really. I tried violin as a child, but it never clicked. No. Victor smiled slightly. I meant what other pieces? Oh. Lena felt her cheeks warm. Almost anything, really. Classical is my focus at school, but I grew up playing everything from church hymns to pop songs at family gatherings. Would you play something else? Your choice. Lena thought for a moment, then began a piece she rarely performed in public. Her own composition. It was simpler than the classical works she'd played earlier, but more personal. A melody she'd written during those long nights at Grandma Rosa's bedside, when the world had narrowed to the sound of labored breathing and the tick of hospital machines. The notes were gentle but insistent, like a question asked over and over, without expectation of answer. As the piece progressed, the melody transformed, gathering strength and clarity before resolving into something that wasn't quite peace but closer to acceptance. When the last note faded, Victor remained silent for several seconds. That was beautiful, he said finally. Chopin? Lena shook her head. Mine, actually. You compose as well? His surprise seemed genuine. When I have time, which isn't often. Lena gestured vaguely at the restaurant beyond the Tuscany room. Bills don't pay themselves. Victor's brow furrowed. The conservatory doesn't offer scholarships? They do. I have one. But it only covers tuition, not living expenses. And when Grandma got sick, Lena trailed off, unsure why she was sharing so much with this man who had mocked her only hours ago. I understand, Victor said quietly, and somehow Lena believed he did. There was something in his eyes, a recognition perhaps of struggle even if the circumstances had been different. Their conversation was interrupted by Mr. Leone, who approached with a warm smile. Ms. Reyes, you've saved my evening, he said. Our guests are enchanted. Would you be willing to continue playing for another hour? With additional compensation, of course. I'd be happy to, Lena replied. As Mr. Leone walked away, Victor lingered. He doesn't know you work here, does he? No, Lena admitted. Roberto, my manager, thought it best not to mention it. Your secret's safe, Victor said. Then after a pause, would you consider playing at another event? I'm hosting a charity gala next month at the Grand Hotel. The usual pianist is talented, but conventional. Your playing has something different, something authentic. Lena blinked in surprise. You want to hire me? As a featured performer, not background music, Victor clarified. It pays well, very well. Before Lena could respond, the young man from Victor's table, Parker, approached hesitantly. Sorry to interrupt, he said, looking nervously between them. But the others are wondering if we're still discussing the investment opportunity tonight. Or, tell them we'll continue tomorrow. Victor replied, not unkindly. Tonight is for music. Parker nodded and retreated. Victor turned back to Lena. Think about my offer? Here's my card. My personal number is on the back. As he walked away, Lena turned the heavy cardstock over in her hands. The personal number of a billionaire, written in blue ink. What a strange night this had become. For the next hour, Lena played everything from Bach to Gershwin, occasionally, taking requests from the appreciative audience. The tension that had knotted her shoulders all evening during her serving shift had vanished, replaced by the familiar, pleasant tiredness that came after a good performance. During a brief break, Roberto approached, beaming. Mr. Leone is thrilled, he whispered. He asked if you'd be interested in playing here regularly on weekend evenings. As a pianist, not a server, Lena clarified. Roberto nodded. Though we'd hate to lose you in the dining room, Lena smiled. Let me think about it. Tonight had opened unexpected doors. Malin's card sat next to Victor's on the piano, both representing possibilities that hadn't existed hours ago. As the evening wound down, guests began to leave, stopping by the piano to compliment Lena on their way out. Mr. Leone's party had moved to another room for private discussions, but Victor remained, sitting alone at a small table near the piano, nursing a single glass of whiskey as he listened. During her final piece, Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, Lena found herself playing for him, though she would never have admitted it. There was something in his solitary presence, in the way he listened with such complete attention, that pulled the music from her fingers. When she finished, the room was nearly empty. Victor approached the piano one last time. Thank you, he said simply, for playing. For reminding me of something I'd forgotten. He seemed about to say more, then changed his mind. Good night, Ms. Reyes. I hope to hear from you about the gala. After he left, Lena sat alone at the piano, her fingers resting lightly on the silent keys. The night had begun with humiliation, and might end with opportunity. But more than the business cards or job offers, what stayed with her was the music itself. How it had built a bridge between her world and Victor's. How it had shown him who she really was in a way words never could. She played one final piece, just for herself in the empty room. Tomorrow would bring decisions and possibilities, but tonight had already brought something precious. The reminder of why she had fallen in love with music in the first place. Its power to transform not just moments, but people. The morning after her unexpected performance, Lena woke to sunlight, streaming through her apartment's small window. For a moment she lay still, wondering if last night had been a dream. The business cards on her nightstand proved otherwise. Mei Lin from Crescent Records and Victor Reed with his personal number, scrawled on the back. Her phone buzzed with a text from her roommate Tina. There's coffee? Also dying to hear about last night, Lena smiled. Tina had already left for her weekend shift at the hospital when Lena got home last night. She'd sent a quick message about the bizarre turn her evening had taken, but promised details later. In the tiny kitchen, Tina sat perched on a stool, her nurse's scrubs wrinkled from a long night shift. Despite obvious exhaustion, her eyes lit up when Lena entered. There she is, the piano queen who humbled the mighty Victor Reed. Tina pushed a mug of coffee across the counter. I need every detail. Lena leaned against the counter, warming her hands on the mug. It still doesn't feel real. The part where a billionaire was a complete jerk to you? Or the part where you showed him up with your amazing talent? Both, Lena laughed. And he actually apologized. Tina's eyebrows shot up. Seriously? Men like that don't apologize. This one did. Lena described the events of the night, the pianist's car trouble, Roberto's desperation, her performance, and the surprising aftermath. And now I have options. Real ones. Like what? Lena counted on her fingers. 1. Keep working at Bellissimo as a server while finishing school. 2. Take Mr. Leone's offer to play piano there on weekends. Better pay, but still not enough to quit the serving job entirely. 3. Call Mei Lin and see if Crescent Records is actually interested or if she was just being nice. And 4. Do Victor's charity event? Maybe. Lena frowned into her coffee. I'm still not sure about that one. Why not? You said it pays. Well, it does, but... Lena struggled to articulate her hesitation. He was so dismissive, Tina. Like I was nothing. And yes, he apologized, but only after discovering I had a skill he valued. Tina nodded thoughtfully. Fair point. Would he have apologized if you were just a waitress? Exactly. But people can change, right? Isn't that the whole point of those Christmas movies you love? Tina grinned. Rich, grumpy man learns lesson about humanity? This isn't a movie, Lena protested, but she smiled, despite herself. And I have to be practical. The charity gala would pay enough to cover 2 months' rent. Then do it. Take his money, play your heart out, and use it to build the life you want. Tina drained her coffee. That's the best revenge anyway. Lena's phone rang, an unknown number. She answered hesitantly. Ms. Reyes? This is Anthony Leone. Lena stood straighter automatically, as if her boss could see her in her faded pajamas. Good morning, Mr. Leone. I hope I'm not calling too early. I wanted to thank you again for last night and formalize my offer for you to play at Bellissimo regularly. Friday and Saturday evenings, 7 to 10. The pay would be $300 per night, plus any tips from the guests. Lena caught Tina's eye, who was watching with raised eyebrows. $300 per night? Is that acceptable? I understand it's less than professional musicians typically charge, but it would be steady work. It's very generous, Lena replied, mind racing. That was more than double what she made serving tables. Could I think about it and call you back? Of course. I'll need to know by Monday if you're interested in starting next weekend. After hanging up, Lena relayed the conversation to Tina, who squealed with excitement. That's amazing. You could cut back serving shifts, have more time to practice, and still pay rent. I know. Lena paced the small kitchen. But if I take weekend, playing gigs, I might miss other opportunities. Auditions, competitions, or charity galas for billionaires. Tina teased. Lena rolled her eyes. I still haven't decided about that. Then decide. Call him. Now? It's Saturday morning. Tina shrugged. Rich people are always working. What's the worst that happens? He doesn't answer? After Tina headed to bed for some much-needed sleep, Lena sat by the window, staring at Victor's card. The heavy cardstock felt out of place in her small apartment with its second-hand furniture and water stains on the ceiling. Finally, she dialed the number. Victor answered on the third ring. Reed. Mr. Reed, this is Lena Reyes. From last night. She winced at her awkward introduction. Ms. Reyes. His voice warmed slightly. I was hoping you'd call. Have you considered my offer? I have, but I have some questions first. Of course. Lena took a deep breath. The charity gala. What exactly would you expect? Background music while people eat, or an actual performance? A performance, Victor replied without hesitation. 2 sets, 30 minutes each. You'd be a featured artist, not background ambiance. And the charity? What's the cause? There was a brief pause. Music education in underserved schools. We fund instruments, instruction, program costs. Lena hadn't expected that. That's actually really wonderful. You sound surprised. There was a hint of amusement in his voice. I guess I am, a little. Lena decided honesty was the best approach. Last night, you didn't strike me as someone particularly interested in helping others. Rather than taking offense, Victor laughed. Fair assessment based on my behavior. But people contain multitudes, Ms. Reyes, even rich jerks like me. His self-awareness surprised her. When is the gala? 3 weeks from today. We'd need at least one rehearsal beforehand to check the piano and acoustics. The fee is $5,000 for the evening. Lena nearly dropped the phone. $5,000 for one night? Too low? I can go to $7,000. No, I mean $5,000 is... That's more than fair. It was more than fair, it was life-changing. 3 months of rent and expenses, or the breathing room to cut back significantly on serving shifts, and focus on finishing her degree. Excellent. My assistant will email you the details, and Ms. Reyes? Yes? Thank you for calling. I meant what I said last night. After they hung up, Lena sat in stunned silence. The day before, she had been worried about making rent next month. Now she had multiple opportunities that could change everything. Her phone buzzed with a text from Roberto. Chen quit. Mr. Leone wants to know if you can play tonight too. Same rate. Lena texted back her agreement, then called Mei Lin at Crescent Records. The call went to voicemail, so she left a message introducing herself and expressing interest in meeting. 3 hours later, Lena pushed through Bellissimo's employee entrance, her small backpack containing the black dress Diane had told her to keep. The restaurant was quieter than on Friday nights, with a mellower weekend crowd. Roberto greeted her with evident relief. Thank you for coming in. Mr. Leone's in a much better mood today after your performance last night. He's telling everyone he discovered you. Lena smiled. Let him. I'm just grateful for the opportunity. So, you're our new weekend pianist? I'm still thinking about it, Lena said. But I'm leaning toward yes. As she changed into the black dress and prepared for another evening at the piano, Lena felt a strange mix of emotions. Just 24 hours ago, she had been a server, invisible, to the wealthy patrons she waited on. Now she was being treated as an artist worthy of respect. The grand piano waited for her in the main dining room tonight rather than the private Tuscany room. As Lena settled onto the bench, adjusting its height with practiced movements, she noticed several diners looking her way with interest. Word had spread about last night's performance. Mr. Leone had made sure of it, no doubt hoping to draw a crowd with his new discovery. Lena felt a flicker of nervousness. These people had expectations. Now, she began with a piece she knew intimately, a Schubert impromptu that flowed from her fingers like water. As she played, she thought about the strange turn her life had taken. The humiliation from Victor now seemed like a blessing in disguise. If he hadn't been so rude, Roberto might never have discovered her ability, and she wouldn't be sitting here now. Halfway through her first set, the front door opened and Lena's fingers nearly stumbled on the keys. Victor Reed entered, alone this time, dressed more casually than the night before, in a simple black sweater rather than a suit. He nodded to the host and was led to a small table within view of the piano. When their eyes met, Victor gave her a small smile and a slight nod. Not the condescending acknowledgement of a wealthy patron, but the respectful greeting of one professional to another. Lena finished the piece, then moved directly into one of her own compositions, the one she had played for him last night. It was a private communication, musician to listener, and Victor's smile deepened in recognition. Between sets, as Lena took a short break, Victor approached. I hope you don't mind my coming, he said. I wanted to hear you play again. I don't mind, Lena replied, surprised to find she meant it. I've been thinking about what you said last night, about seeing what we expect to see. Oh? Lena took a sip from her water glass. Victor looked uncomfortable, a far cry from the arrogant man who had mocked her the previous evening. I've been that way my whole career, seeing the surface, making quick judgments. It's effective in business, but as a human, he shook his head. Not so much. It's never too late to look deeper, Lena said. That's why I'm here, to listen more carefully. He hesitated, then added, not just to the music. Their conversation was interrupted by a server delivering Victor's drink. As the young man walked away, Victor called, "Thank you," after him, too. Simple words he likely wouldn't have bothered with 24 hours ago. Lena returned to the piano for her second set, aware of Victor watching her. She played differently knowing he was there, not better or worse, just with more intention, more awareness of the connection between performer and audience. By the end of the evening, when the restaurant had emptied and only a few staff remained, closing down, Lena felt both exhausted and exhilarated. Mr. Leone had already left, but not before pressing an envelope into her hand with her payment and asking again about the regular weekend position. As she gathered her things, Victor approached one final time. "Would you join me for coffee? There's a place around the corner, still open." Lena hesitated, caught between curiosity and caution. "Just coffee," Victor clarified. "I'd like to talk more about the gala and, well, I think we got off on the wrong foot. I'd like to start again." Lena studied his face. The same features that had looked so cold and dismissive yesterday now. Open, almost vulnerable. People could change, Tina had said, or at least they could try to. "Coffee sounds good," she decided. "But I should warn you, I'm not very good at small talk." Victor smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. "Good, neither am I." The coffee shop around the corner from Bellissimo was nearly empty at this late hour. A single barista looked up from wiping the counter as Lena and Victor entered, the bell above the door announcing their arrival. The space was warm and inviting, with soft lighting and the lingering scent of coffee and baked goods. "We're closing in 20 minutes, the barista called out, not unkindly. "We won't be long," Victor replied, his tone respectful rather than demanding. They ordered a simple black coffee for Victor and a chai latte for Lena, and settled at a corner table. For a moment, neither spoke, the silence between them filled with the gentle jazz playing over the shop's speakers. "So," Lena said finally, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. "The charity gala?" "Yes." Victor seemed relieved to have something specific to discuss. "It's at the Grand Hotel downtown. We've held it there for the past 5 years. And it supports music education?" Victor nodded. "My foundation funds programs in schools where arts budgets have been cut, instruments, teachers, after-school programs." "That's surprising," Lena said before she could stop herself. Victor raised an eyebrow. "Because I was such a jerk to you?" Lena appreciated his directness. "Well, yes. You have to admit, supporting young musicians doesn't seem to align with how you treated someone working to become one." To her surprise, Victor didn't bristle at her candor. Instead, he looked thoughtful, running a finger around the rim of his coffee cup. "There's a difference between what we support publicly and how we behave privately," he said finally. "At least there was for me." He met her eyes. "I've spent years building a foundation that reflects values I wasn't actually living by." "Why music education?" Lena asked, genuinely curious. Victor was quiet for a long moment. "My mother was a piano teacher," he said finally. "In a small town where most families couldn't afford lessons. She taught anyway, often for free. When she died, I wanted to honor that part of her life." The personal revelation surprised Lena. It was hard to reconcile this man speaking softly about his mother's generosity with the one who had mocked her at the restaurant. "Did you play?" she asked. A small smile crossed his face. "Badly. I had the technical skill, but none of the heart. Not like you." "Heart isn't something you're born with," Lena said. "It's something you develop through living, feeling, experiencing." "Maybe that's my problem," Victor replied. "Too much time in boardrooms, not enough in the real world. It's never too late to change that." They fell into conversation more easily than Lena would have expected. Victor asked about her background, growing up with a single mother who worked 2 jobs, discovering piano at a community center where an old woman volunteered to teach neighborhood kids, winning her first competition at 12, the scholarship that had made conservatory possible, and finally, her grandmother's illness that had interrupted Her studies. She raised me after my mom died, Lena explained. There was never any question about taking time off to care for her. That explains the piece you played, Victor said. Your composition. There was so much feeling in it. I wrote it during those months. Sometimes playing was the only thing that kept me sane sitting in that hospital room. Victor's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then silenced it without answering. Sorry, always something. It must be exhausting, Lena said, being constantly in demand. It's the life I built. Victor shrugged. Though lately I've been wondering if it's the right one. The barista approached their table. Sorry folks, we're closing up now. Outside, the night air was cool and clear. Stars peeked through the city's light pollution, and the street was quiet except for the occasional passing car. My driver can take you home, Victor offered, gesturing to a sleek black car waiting at the curb. Lena shook her head. I'll take the bus, it's not far. The bus? Victor looked genuinely concerned. It's nearly midnight. I do it all the time, Lena said, amused by his alarm. This is my real world, remember? Victor seemed about to argue, then stopped himself. At least let me wait with you at the bus stop. They walked in comfortable silence to the bus shelter half a block away. The street was well lit, with a few late-night establishments still open, their neon signs casting colorful reflections on the wet pavement. 3 weeks, Victor said suddenly. What? The gala is in 3 weeks, and I realized we never actually confirmed you'll play. Oh. Lena had almost forgotten the original purpose of their conversation. Yes, I'd like to. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for accepting. Victor hesitated. And for giving me a second chance. Most people wouldn't have. Most people haven't heard you apologize, Lena pointed out. It was surprisingly good as apologies go. Victor laughed, the sound warm in the cool night air. I've had practice lately. Parker, the young man from my table, has been on the receiving end of too many of my bad moods. I'm trying to do better with him too. The bus appeared at the far end of the street, its headlights cutting through the darkness. That's me, Lena said. I'll be in touch about the rehearsal, Victor replied. And Lena, I'm glad you called today. The bus pulled away. Lena watched Victor through the window. He stood under the streetlight, hands in his pockets, watching until the bus turned the corner. Such a different man from the one who had dismissed her just 24 hours ago. 3 weeks leading up to the gala passed in a blur of activity. Lena accepted Mr. Leone's offer to play at Bellissimo on weekends, cutting her serving shifts to just 2 weeknights. The extra time allowed her to practice more, and her professors noticed the improvement in her playing. May Lin from Crescent. Records came to hear her at Bellissimo and arranged for Lena to record a demo at their studio. No promises, May had said, but you have something special. We want to see where it goes. The night of the gala arrived with unexpected nerves. Lena had performed countless times before, but never for an audience like this. Wealthy donors, music industry professionals, and according to Victor, several influential classical music critics. The Grand Hotel's ballroom was transformed for the evening, with elegant table settings, subtle lighting, and the magnificent grand piano positioned on a small stage at the front. Backstage, in a small preparation room, Lena smoothed the fabric of her dress, a deep blue gown that Tina had insisted on helping her choose. It's an investment, her roommate had declared, like a business suit but for pianists. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Victor entered, looking distinguished in a tailored tuxedo. How are you feeling? He asked. Nervous, Lena admitted. There are a lot of important people out there. None more important than you tonight. Victor's voice held a certainty that calmed her slightly. This is your moment, Lena. These people are here to support music education, yes, but they're also here to witness talent like yours, to be reminded of why it matters. The simple vote of confidence meant more than she expected. 5 minutes, called a staff member from the hallway. Victor turned to leave, then paused. I have something for you. He pulled a small envelope from his pocket. A thank you for agreeing to play tonight. After he left, Lena opened the envelope. Inside was a check, not for the promised $5,000, but for $10,000. A note was attached. For the time and talent you've already given. Your playing has changed more than you know. VR. The introduction was brief. Victor welcomed everyone, spoke passionately about the Foundation's mission, and then, with evident pride, introduced Lena. As she walked onto the stage, the spotlight warm on her face, she saw hundreds of expectant faces turned toward her. At a table near the front sat Victor, watching her with genuine admiration. Lena settled at the piano, took a deep breath, and began to play. Her program started with classical pieces that showcased her technical skill: Bach, Chopin, Liszt. The audience responded with enthusiastic applause after each selection. For her second set, Lena had prepared something different, a piece she had composed especially for this evening, inspired by the unexpected journey of the past 3 weeks. This final piece is new, she told the audience. I call it Unexpected Turns. It's about how life can change in a moment, how people can surprise you, and how music can build bridges between worlds that seem far apart. As she played, Lena poured everything into the music. The humiliation of that night at Bellissimo, the triumph of her performance, the surprising connection with Victor, and the doors that had opened as a result. The composition moved from discordant tension to moments of questioning beauty, finally resolving into something hopeful and open-ended. When the final note faded, there was a moment of complete silence before the room erupted in applause. People rose to their feet, their faces alight with appreciation. In the front row, Victor was the first to stand, his eyes never leaving her face. Later, at the reception following her performance, Lena found herself surrounded by people eager to compliment her playing. Critics offered their cards, asking for interviews. A representative from the National Symphony mentioned an upcoming opportunity for soloists. Mei Lin introduced her to several Crescent Records executives who spoke encouragingly about her demo and future possibilities. Through it all, Victor kept his distance, allowing her to have her moment. It was only toward the end of the evening, as the crowd began to thin, that he approached her again. You were magnificent, he said simply. Thank you for the opportunity, Lena replied. And for the generous check. It's too much. It's not nearly enough. Victor shook his head. What you've given is worth far more. What do you mean? You reminded me why my mother taught music in the first place. It wasn't just about notes on a page. It was about touching people, connecting with them, making them feel something real. He looked around the ballroom at the foundation he had built. I've been going through the motions for years. Tonight I remembered the heart of it, Lena thought, about the man she had met 3 weeks ago, cold, dismissive, seeing only surfaces, and the one standing before her now. People could change if they wanted to badly enough. So what happens now, she asked. Victor smiled. For you? I think you already know. The world is about to discover what I did that night at Bellissimo. And for you? I'm working on it. His voice softened. But I'd like to hear more of your music along the way, if that's possible. Lena thought about the journey that had brought her here, the long hours of practice, the struggle to balance work and study. The night a billionaire had tried to humiliate her, only to be silenced by her talent. None of it had been easy, but standing here now, she wouldn't change a moment of it. I think that's possible, she said, offering her hand. As Victor took it, she added, but fair warning, the real world isn't always comfortable. I'm counting on it, he replied. It's where the music comes from, after all.